I want to thank you all for listening and for sharing your suggestions with me. I also want to thank all of you that have written reviews on the various podcast platforms where this show can be found. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by the 99 guests that I've had on my show over the last 4+ years. I started the show as a hobby. I love connecting with new people and learning about their life's journey. I also love to ask questions, and what better way to do that than to conduct interviews with interesting people in my industry? Sometimes we got beyond the retail space, like when I interviewed Patty Steele, former co host of the Scott in the Morning radio show on CBS FM in New York, along with Scott Shannon, or the time that I interviewed Bob Wischusen, voice of ESPN, for an array of sporting events. Each of them has offered great insights into their first story, where they grew up, and the things that might have driven them to become who they have become. It's so interesting to hear all of the similarities. We heard, my parents were educators, and that taught me to have a strong interest in learning new things and being inquisitive. We also heard, my parents were entrepreneurs, and that drove me to start my own business. We heard these same comments time and time again. The interviews are all very conversational. There's very little prep work done so that we can keep it as natural as possible. The guests seem to like it that way, and the listeners, all of you, have seemingly enjoyed what I've done. You cannot do a podcast without editing and some graphics, so I need to thank some folks. I need to thank two people for all of their work. First, Max Branstetter of Max Podcasting. You hear the call out each show, but without Max, I never would have gotten the show off the ground. He helped me with the theme, the music, and he handles all of the editing. So thank you, Max, for all that you've done. And also, for each show, we create a graphic that I use on LinkedIn and Facebook and other advertising. This is done by Viorel Leganaru. Viorel lives in Romania, and we worked together many years ago while at Steve Madden, and he's been super helpful in getting all of this work done. Thank you, Viorel. If you listened to previous shows, you know that we wrap it up with 3 key takeaways that you can take back to your personal and business lives. I started this feature simply as a way of summarizing the show, but it also turned out to be the most often talked about portion of the show. So many people have told me that it really helps to bring home what the guest had to say. Based on that feedback and wanting to do something a little different for show 100, here are 3 of the most often recurring themes from guests. This was not easy to do because we've been lucky to have great guests who have been insightful and thought-provoking. Exactly what I've been trying to do with this show. So we'll cover the themes, we'll intersperse some of the audiograms that we did with some of the guests, and you'll be able to get a chance to hear what's transpired over the last 100 shows. So theme number 1, regardless of the role that you're in, you need to be a people person. You need to be able to network, and during that process, you will help people and some will help you. Be kind and set the right example for your team, and regardless of what you're doing, be sure to take a lesson from every experience that you have. Craig Brummers, the CMO of American Eagle, spoke about setting the right example.
My parents are kind people. My family is a kind family. And I think I've learned from them that even at this stage of my career, I think that people who have had the opportunity to work with me say, hey, Craig, he's a good guy. He's a nice guy. And sometimes in business, I guess, nice people don't always finish first. But I think I've had a pretty damn good career by practicing kindness.
Well, I would certainly agree with that statement, having worked with you and have stayed friends with you now for 10 years. I think you're a very good guy, and you're very right for saying it that way. I was waiting for you to have a but in there, but there is no but, because you are a heck of a good guy. Gary Vaynerchuk, CEO of VaynerMedia and chairman of VaynerX, boiled his work down to being kind.
What makes me work, Mark, and what makes people like me work, and what I would love to get some of the listeners to start to consider, is what actually allows me to play it the way I'm playing it is the lack of judgment when I didn't play it well. Too many people beat themselves up instead of using it as a learning experience. I'm just refining along the way. It's my relationship with myself where I give myself breathing room to be a human that allows me to keep doing things and making them better because I'm tasting different things, because I am taking quote unquote time risk on a daily basis, which makes the learning from the outcome of it, pro or con, a learning that I can build on.
Max Branstetter, host of his own show, the Wild Business Growth Podcast, and producer of the Marketing Playbook Podcast, spoke about how he uses networking to propel his business. Why podcasting? What was it about it that seemed to really entice you to doing it?
The biggest thing for me that I realized really quick once I started doing it was it's an incredible networking tool. Like it opens doors. And Mark, I know you're a huge fan of networking and connecting with new people as well as reconnecting with friends of old. And I've never seen any sort of networking tool like a podcast, because when you get together like we are right now and like you do all throughout the year with guests, whether virtual or in person, you never know what that conversation is going to turn into.
Radio personality Patty Steele spoke about being able to take a lesson from all of your experiences. Talk a little bit about, as your career has progressed, the times when somebody has said, they come in and they've said, well, we're done. How do you feel there? And then how do you move on to the next place?
I'm really, and it's kind of a weird, I'm not going to say weird. It's the thing that I treasure most about myself. I'm a forward-looking person. No regrets. I think we learn from everything. And whether it's from, being fired, getting sick, having other issues in your life, to me, every moment that something is handed to you that you're tempted to go, holy crap, what just happened to me, is a moment when you can say, okay, what can I learn from this? Where do I take this now? And I have never failed to be delighted with that learning process. You move on.
Carolyn Anderson, Group Vice President, Digital Marketing and CRM for Spark Group, spoke about some of the roles that she's gotten throughout her career and how she has used her network to secure those positions.
So I reached out to the person that would be my manager for a role that did not exist. And I said, I have a plane ticket. Can you get lunch on this day? And I had bought the plane ticket and just showed up. And that's how that job ended up happening for me. And he's one of the best managers I've ever had, and somebody that I keep in touch with very regularly since then. So it's been very important to me. Spark Group was a little bit different. Spark Group, I did work with a firm, so it wasn't as much, a referral from somebody that I knew in my network. However, in terms of landing the role, and making sure that I was prepared for my interviews and knew a lot, I definitely networked around to figure out, the person that was the CEO of the company at the time. What do we have in common? Who do we know in common? Is there any way that we're connected somehow? And that helped me a lot during the interview process to make it go smoother, and just have that personal connection so that they're thinking about you top of mind.
Thriving brands today have one thing in common. They make it a priority to understand their customers. Imperity uses AI to unify customer data and help businesses know exactly who their customers are and what they care about most. Find new customers, grow loyalty, get better return on ad spend, and manage privacy compliance. An accurate, unified customer data foundation connected with the teams and tools that need it makes everything you do with customer data work better. Build your strategy on Imperity, the platform for customer data. Learn more at imperity.com. And theme number 2. We often heard guests speaking about how they started their career in one kind of a role and eventually pivoted to doing something else. The goal, of course, is to be able to advance your career, but you don't always end up in the same place that you started. Bernadine Wu, entrepreneur and a digital consulting expert and founder of boutique consulting agency Fit for Commerce, shared her story of starting on Wall Street and moving into consult.
From the technology side, the PowerPoint skills, and also we did, of course, do business consulting. I think those 3 things are foundations that I take with me and use every day, even as I progressed into different industries and different fields.
So how long of a period of time was it from graduation at Dartmouth to when Fit for Commerce was developed?
Oh, gosh, then you'd know how old I was.
Maybe there's a method to the madness. I've known you for a long time and I have no idea.
Oh, that's nice of you to say. It's as I look back, I wouldn't say it was a linear route, but there were some progressions. At Anderson then, Accenture now, was a really large company. It was like 50,000 people. And every company that I went to got smaller and smaller.
Andy Ostroy, my longtime friend of 30 years and host of his own podcast, The Back Room with Andy Ostroy, has moved from the direct marketing industry to the entertainment industry.
I had started writing a book. My natural inclination is to be a writer, but sort of midway, I got the sense that this should be a documentary. She was a filmmaker, make a film. And I had no business making a film. I had never really, I hadn't gone to film school. I hadn't directed. But what I looked at, and this is a really important thing for people who are listening, who are either in a position where they need to reinvent themselves, they find themselves unemployed suddenly after years or whatever. Just take the skills you have. You could apply it to so many things.
PJ Oleksak, the CEO at Nuts.com, spoke about her passion for working in a family-owned business, how she's wired to do that, and how it's all about advancing your career.
This is something that I don't know if it's a superpower or a skill or if I'm personally a masochist, but I love working with founders. Love. So I've had 3 tours of duty with different founders. I think they're such a special breed. I mean, taking something from this idea and disrupting an industry and thinking you can bring it to life is really, really special. I have an immense amount of respect and appreciation for the passion, the care of building something that, becomes your baby.
Nate Checketts, founder of Roan, offered, sometimes you just have to follow your heart. We heard Nate speak a few times about decisions that he made earlier in his life that might not have been the most pragmatic choices. He looked at his options and chose the one where he felt he would be the most fulfilled. It might not always work out as expected, but at least you can say that you pursued a dream.
I was kind of miserable like 6 months in, and I had a lot of guilt about it because I knew I had a great job and I had a job that a lot of people coveted. And yet after working in a startup for 3 or 4 years, it's a very different environment to move to a corporate office. And so I remember I had this aha moment where I was like, you know what? I really am. I'm just an entrepreneur. Like, I need the freedom. I need the flexibility to go and build something that didn't necessarily exist before.
Jeffrey Slater, founder of the Marketing Sage Consultancy, spoke about how he has remade his career over time, from working in CPG companies to now having his own marketing agency. What's that one piece of advice you might give people that are considering selling?
It's a little different for everybody, of course, but I'm just a very curious person and want to keep learning. And so I always look at it as, what's the next chapter going to give me as an opportunity to learn something new? So I didn't look at it. I wasn't looking in the rear view mirror. I was looking forward and saying through the windshield, so to speak, what's out there? What else can I do? What else can I learn? And I think that's kind of been a watchword for my career.
Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, they've helped 13 of their customers get acquired, with one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd recently. Plus, they were ranked as the 12th fastest growing agency in the world by Adweek. If you're an e-commerce business that needs help scaling your ads profitably, check them out at element.com, spelled ELUMYNT.com. And the third major theme, being able to grow your business is so important, and obviously you need to be able to acquire customers, but you also need to know who they are and how to get them to spend more with you over time, and those key metrics that drive success. You also need to understand what drives your business. Joel Quadracci, CEO of Quad, spoke about the processes that companies need to use to grow. As you'll hear, growth hides all sins. Know your customer and what makes your business successful. How do you think that the capabilities that you had developed have allowed you to survive all these other businesses going away?
Well, the consolidation was inevitable. These are capital intensive businesses, and there was a lot of growth. But as soon as the pie stopped growing like it did, and other mediums came in, and we had some of the disruption, it's hard that's a hard thing to deal with if you're just relying on growth to run a good business. Remember, growth hides all sins. And my father used to say, when the tide goes out, you find out who's wearing a bathing suit. And it's kind of the story of the printing industry is you go through a consolidation phase, which probably, was 20 years, 30 years in lifespan, where you went from, a whole bunch down to just a handful.
Jason Goldberg, Chief Commerce Strategy Officer at Publicis, spoke about AI and how it can be helpful to your business as you look for growth.
Yeah, so I have a mixed relationship with AI. I'll confess, I always worry when someone comes to me and they say, I want help executing a specific tactic. Like, nobody should do anything because it's AI. Like, AI is a tool in the bag. I do have a pet peeve around that. But that being said, there are a bunch of pretty exciting use cases where AI can help solve real world problems for retailers.
Rose Hamilton, founder of Compass Rose Ventures, spoke about metrics and the fact that you really need to know them like your own name. What you measure is what you can improve upon.
In classic retail businesses, I think the metric that gets overlooked the quickest, especially in a fast fashion business like Wilson's, was really lifetime value. And so knowing that lifetime value all the time is so important because it's how you can determine how much you can afford to spend on new customer acquisition. So at all times, trending and watching lifetime value and really putting strategies around growing that with retention and with average order value increases and thinking about your mixes with your categories, that's one piece. And then the other piece is new customer acquisition, knowing that number and where it's trending, and being able to see the split between organic versus paid.
Bill Bass, CMO at Full Beauty Brands, spoke about the need to take care of your customers.
New customers never retain at the same rate as your loyal customers. So you take off your loyal customers and then you try and replace them with new customers, but new customers are never as good. Even if you did a 1-for-1 swap, new customers kind of, my rule of thumb is they perform at about half the level. You get about half the lifetime value out of new customers that you're getting out of loyal customers. Companies, they don't do a good job of taking care of the customers that they have, and they get into trouble.
John Shea, founder of Momentum Commerce, spoke about the need for good management of your key metrics. Be rigorous in establishing business metrics and then the measurement and review of those metrics. You cannot manage what you don't measure, so establish and communicate out those vital factors of managing your business.
I think the two that have stuck with me the most, one is the idea of OKRs, objectives and key results, quarterly planning, and measurable results. I've always been somebody who's very competitive and goal-oriented. And so finding myself in a situation where there was really good rigor around goal setting made me a lot better. I've taken that with me and sort of used that. And that's become a framework that I think's been popularized outside of Google. But at the time, that was sort of a new thing that they'd sort of pioneered. The other one is, and it wasn't formalized while I was there, but there's been books written on it subsequently, is a communication style in business, there's a book called Radical Candor. Have you heard of that, Mark?
No, I haven't.
It's sort of a communication framework which involves being very direct in your communication with your business colleagues, but also being very open about how you care about them.
William Harris, co-founder of digital agency Element, spoke about content. I see so many brands spend time and money on digital marketing tactics, but they leave out time and resources for what might be the most important thing, and that's content. You can have a TikTok strategy, you can send emails or SMS messages, but if you don't have compelling content that is brand right and targets your core customer, you can be wasting all of those dollars that you're spending on media. Talk about those marketing tactics, and then I have some questions about how they have been changing.
Tactic-wise, there's a lot of ways that people try to go about building their business. One of our favorite ways, obviously the bread and butter for what we do, is on the advertising side of things. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to expand out on advertising and use that to increase the EBITDA, to increase your profit, so that way you can pay for other growth tactics that might be a little bit slower and longer, like SEO.
And lastly, Although not an overarching theme that we heard, it's still an important point to make, and it impacts your personal and professional lives. My longtime friend, Rodney Woodruff, who partnered with me at retailer Steve Madden, and the most positive person I know, said that there's a solution to almost every problem. That's a Rodney quote for sure, and one that we often lose sight of in our businesses. Be pragmatic and reasonable, leverage the team you've put together, and trust their capabilities.
There was always a way to solve a problem, right? Whatever the problem may be, whether it be hunger, clothing, shelter. And I experienced all of those, but there was always a solution to those things, whether it was dependent upon the kindness of friends, food pantries where we would wait in line to get meals and things like that. There was always a solution. And so I have been through so many different challenges in my life that I always believe that there is a solution to almost any problem. I think you alluded to me always being super positive. One thing that I realized is that sometimes I still think everything's doable, but I now understand that it's only doable if you have the resources that you need in order to be able to pull them off. So prioritization becomes this major, major thing. And I think that's true.
That's it for the 100th episode of the Marketing Playbook podcast. I want to thank you all for listening and for sharing your suggestions with me. I also want to thank all of you that have written reviews on the various podcast platforms where this show can be found. I'm looking forward to the next 100 shows. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode and all the others. And remember, the devil is in the details.